Back on June 9th, Minnesota became the 29th state to put in effect a primary seatbelt law. And we're pleased that our neighbor, Wisconsin, also passed primary seatbelt, as well as Florida and Arkansas are the more recent states. We know that without question, the key piece to advancing Minnesota moving toward zero death is the enactment of the primary seatbelt law and saving lives on our roadways. The primary law simply means that all drivers and all passengers in a vehicle need to be buckled up or in proper child restraint. And that includes the back seat. So law enforcement can pull you over for that reason alone. The purpose of primary seatbelt law is to increase belt compliance, and as a result, preventing the needless tragedies and fatalities, serious injuries on our roadways, and that devastating loss to families and loved ones. We now know just how effective primary seatbelt law can be. The Office of Traffic Safety with the Department of Public Safety just conducted our annual 2-week observational survey that was completed in August. And we can now report that motorists are using their seatbelt at an all-time high of 90%. This is a significant jump from last year's belt use rate, which was an average of 87%. Reaching this 90% compliance rate is a major milestone in Minnesota and is clearly linked to the primary seatbelt law. Minnesotans are now more aware of the law, and we have done a tremendous amount of education, and our enforcement has all come together to truly change motorist behavior and their choices to wear their seatbelt. The increase in belt use is also reflected in our crash data. Since June 9th, when the law became effective, the number of unbelted traffic deaths has certainly dropped. The number of unbelted traffic deaths is actually 10% lower than the same period from last year. In just 2 months after passing the primary seatbelt law, we are pleased to announce that the law is having its intended effect. Minnesotans are buckling up and walking away from the crash. They are living and they are uninjured, and fewer family and friends are experiencing this devastating loss that's so unnecessary. Coinciding with the news of this record high seatbelt compliance rate is the announcement of Minnesota's first click it or ticket enforcement campaign since the passing of the primary law. National studies and our data has proven over and over that the key to maintaining increased seatbelt compliance is coupling education with effective enforcement. Combining education and enforcement is the cornerstone of our Towards Zero Death initiatives and our goals. And it's critical for the primary seatbelt law because we know that it saves lives. A seatbelt is simply your best defense in the event of a crash. And we urge every motorist to buckle up and avoid the harsh and violent consequences. Here to discuss our Click It or Ticket enforcement campaign is Lieutenant Matt Langer with the Minnesota State Patrol.
Well, as Cheri noted, educating the public about the importance of seatbelts and enforcing traffic safety laws is critical to preventing deaths and injuries on our roadways. Starting tomorrow and running through October 22nd, the Minnesota State Patrol and almost 400 other local and county agencies are partnering together in the state's first full-scale statewide enforcement of the primary seatbelt law. These agencies will work extra overtime patrols to ensure you are buckled up. And now troopers and officers and deputies can directly stop motorists for belt violations even if passengers aren't buckled up. Law enforcement believes this effort is the best offense we have against traffic deaths and injuries occurring on the highways. I can tell you on a personal note, on behalf of the State Patrol, there's nothing more frustrating than showing up at a crash and finding a teenage driver ejected and dead in the ditch, or finding a loved one ejected some distance from the vehicle and seriously injured, or finding people within the vehicle that just have suffered minor injuries like broken teeth or broken noses simply because they didn't wear their seatbelt. We've heard every excuse in the book, and none of them cut it. You need to wear your seatbelt. On roads plagued with distracted, speeding, impaired drivers, a seatbelt is your best defense in the case of a crash. We're not interested in writing boatloads of tickets. We're interested in getting people to wear their seat belts. And we hope that the fine, including court costs of $115, give or take in most counties, will do its job in and of itself without us having to issue that citation. The real enforcement of the primary seat belt law begins with every driver. And whether you're the driver or the passenger in a vehicle, you have the ability to make sure that everybody inside your vehicle is wearing their seat belt properly.
Any questions?
So with the increased compliance, do you expect to write more or fewer tickets than with the new law?
We certainly hope to write fewer, and I've said that before. We hope, our goal on behalf of the State Patrol, on behalf of law enforcement, is to write fewer citations. In fact, I would like to write 0 citations, and the only way we can do that is if everybody wears their seatbelt. That is the ultimate goal of primary and the ultimate goal of our enforcement.
You think you'll write fewer?
Absolutely. As long as compliance goes up. You know, it's incumbent on the public to start putting their seatbelts on. We've made a 3% gain. If we make a 5% gain next year, the number of people, the number of potential violations is way down, which will mean less citations.
As we've done stories before the law passed, I was sent out numerous times to do stories, are people wearing seatbelts or not. Standing on the street or driving in my car, I couldn't tell. How in the world can you even, how can you tell?
From the enforcement or the survey side?
I mean, you're in your state trooper car. When I was shooting on the street with a camera, I would, point a camera with the car. I really couldn't tell.
There are cases where it's very difficult to tell, and there are cases where we can't tell, and those vehicles aren't stopped. Law enforcement isn't stopping vehicles to figure out if they have their seatbelt on or off. We only take enforcement actions on those vehicles where we can articulate that the driver or the passenger was not wearing their seatbelt. But you're right, in some cases it's more challenging to see than in others.
So will you be set up on the side of the road, or will you be in parking lots? Because I've seen that before, where they're, where they're kind of waiting in a spot in a parking lot, looking to see if you're leaving, so you're in close range, or is it, do you have anything planned?
It'll be a combination of both. The vast majority of the enforcement will occur just on standard routine patrol, but I think that people will start using different tactics, and one of those may be having a spotter for the reasons you noted, that it's relatively challenging sometimes to see within the squad car looking from car to car. We may use some spotters where someone's standing out where it's easier to see those violations and then stop those people that are in violation of the law.
So you mentioned that you've had excuses. Run through some of those excuses for us.
Well, yeah, it's anything you can think of, but the classic is that it's uncomfortable. The classic is that I don't want to die in my vehicle when it starts on fire as a result of a crash. I want to be thrown clear of my vehicle in the event of a crash. And, I can just tell you from my experience and things that I've seen, those cases are so few and far between that to bet on those odds would just be ridiculous. You need to wear your seatbelt.
Are young guys still most likely not to wear it?
Yeah, clearly those that are unbelted, we are finding that it's the younger driver, the males, and those motorists in greater Minnesota are less likely to buckle up.
Is there a reason for that?
I think it's a cultural shift. When you're looking at greater Minnesota, you're going to have more pickup trucks are in greater Minnesota. We know that the seatbelt use rate is lowest in the type of vehicle, which is the pickup vehicle. So that is part of it. But our younger motorists, surprisingly, from age 16 to 24, are also less likely to buckle up. So I think there may be some peer pressure, possibly, to not buckle. But I think that those passengers in those vehicles need to say and insist that the driver and everyone buckle up before that vehicle goes anywhere.
Does the driver get the ticket if the guy in the backseat doesn't buckle?
Everyone that's 15 years or older will receive a seatbelt ticket. Now, if you've got passengers that are under 15, the driver is responsible for that seatbelt fine, which is $25. Lieutenant Langer talked about that a seatbelt can cost over $100. That includes some fines and surcharges. There will only be one surcharge applied to each vehicle. So a driver may pay for passengers that are under 15 the $25 seatbelt fine, but will not pay an additional surcharge other than one surcharge per vehicle.